It's Professor Samaras with a book for you today. How are you doing? I realized my hands are getting very dry because I'm washing them all the time. Is that happening to you? I'm going to put some Vaseline on them. Probably a good idea because we're washing our hands all the time. Maybe you have some hand cream. But in case your hands are getting very dry, mine are too. Today I'm going to read a book about a very well-known artist named Faith Ringgold. This book is probably for older children because, well, there are pictures. There are a lot of pictures, but there's also more text in this book. Pictures and text. What does it mean when there's more text? It means more words. More words on the page. As we get to books for older children, there are oftentimes more words. Sometimes there are no pictures at all, right? That's why so many book illustrators, the people that make the pictures for books, often work in books that are geared toward younger children. Let's say pre-KK, grades 1 and 2. From grade 3 and up, books often have more text, which means the words. Now, I don't know about you, but I like pictures, and I'm a lot older than you are. So I wish there were pictures in every book. Faith Ringgold is a living artist. She lives here in my city of New York City. She lives in Harlem, and she's 89 years old. And I hope she's doing well in this time of crisis. Faith is a painter, sculptor, writer, and she's most known for her narrative quilts. Now those are big words, right? Narrative quilts. What's a quilt? That one's not too hard, right? A quilt, something you put over yourself to keep warm at night. Some quilts are made by hand, and it is an art form to make quilts. Quilts made by hand that tell a story are called narrative quilts. Narrative means they tell a story, like a book tells a story. A quilt can tell a story. Isn't that great? Oh, here's one. On this side, look at that narrative quilt. Now, you can't see what the story is because the text is too small. But a narrative quilt is a lot like a book, isn't it? It tells a story, but it hangs on the wall or it goes over a bed. You don't turn the pages like you do with a book. Because this book is also a narrative. It's telling a story. And remember when I was talking about my mother-in-law, Jacqueline Verve? She made documentary films, and those tell a story. So in every story, there's usually a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Narrative quilt. Here's another narrative quilt on this side. So she sews, she uses images, and she uses words. That sounds like fun, doesn't it? If you like to sew. Okay, let's start the book. Talking to Faith Ringgold by Faith Ringgold, Linda Freeman, and Nancy Roucher. Here she is, Faith Ringgold, right here. I might not read this whole book today because it's too long. Let's see how fast we go, but I think I might read half today and half another day. So this would be part 1. Faith Ringgold Ringgold says, I am inspired by people who rise above their adversity. What is adversity? Difficulty, right? That's my deepest inspiration. And also, I'm inspired by the fact that if I really, really want to, I think I can do anything. Is that true for you too? Can you do anything if you really, really want to? Okay, introduce yourself. So, who are you? So this book is giving instructions on making a book or telling you how you made it. So when you introduce yourself, who are you? Write a brief biography. Include the facts, name, age, where you were born, but most important, describe yourself. What makes you you? What do you like to do? That's what it says over here. So you see, this book has a sidebar, which is for teachers or for parents or guardians. Explains what you need to do if you're introducing yourself for an autobiography. An autobiography, do you know what it is? It's like a self-portrait, but using words. It's all about yourself. Another question it gives, who influenced you? Is there a special person in your life who influenced you the way Faith Ringgold's mother influenced her? Describe an incident. Well, I already told you somebody that influenced me, and that was my mother-in-law. It sounds like Faith Ringgold's mother influenced her. So let me read. Introducing myself. And by the way, here's Faith Ringgold and her mother on this page when she's a little girl down here. Up here it says Harlem, 135th Street and Lenox Ave around 1930. So there's her street, 135th Street. Introducing myself, I've always lived in Harlem or very close to it. I was born in Central Harlem in 1930. We lived on 146th Street. When I was 12 years old, we moved up to 150th Street and Edgecombe Avenue on Sugar Hill. Until recently, I lived on 145th Street and Edgecombe. I still have a studio there, but my home is now just a few minutes from Harlem over the George Washington Bridge in Englewood, New Jersey. Oh, she's in New Jersey too. I grew up during the time of the Great Depression when many people didn't have jobs or money. Because I had asthma, I never went to kindergarten. I have asthma too. I bet some of you do as well, right? I don't remember going to first grade. I really started going to school in the second grade. And even then, I was out a lot with asthma. That happened to me too. So I was very carefully brought up, and my mother taught me a lot, took me to the museums. She also took me to fun places like the Paramount. I saw all the stars, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald. So I think in a way of speaking that art to me in the beginning was not painting. It was performing. I got a chance to see how someone can communicate to large groups of people. And I think I wanted to reach people too. Performing is what Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington did. They are all in music. So she saw them performing their music. Now, as I said, I was sick. I would be in bed recuperating from asthma, and my mother would give me not only my school books, but I would get paper and crayons to draw, and I would get bits of cloth and needle and thread, and I would make little things. My mother was a fashion designer and a dressmaker, and so cloth sewing were always there. Are you wondering why the bottom of my book is cut like it is? down here. I think I spilled something, or maybe my sons spilled something in homeschool and I just cut the wet part off. Okay, Tar Beach. Now this is Tar Beach. It's a beautiful quilt. Where is Tar Beach? Have you heard the book Tar Beach? Tar Beach is very special. And I know all about it because I live in the city and I also have my own little Tar Beach. Tar Beach, if you look closely, I'm going to put it like this so I can read and you can look at it. If you look closely at Tar Beach, you may learn more about me. It's really about going up to the roof, which has a tar floor, in the summertime when I was a child. In Brooklyn, I do that too. I go to the roof, and I took my children up there when they were younger. It's not unsafe. It has a fence all around it so nobody can fall. That's very important. My father would take the mattress up and my mother would place a sheet on it and some pillows, and we kids would lie on the mattresses. It was very hot and we couldn't have food up there. Watermelon and fried chicken and all kinds of goodies. Yum. The adults would play cards and the children would lie there and listen to them talking, and it was cool. I wrote about this little girl in the picture who is dreaming that she owns all the skyscraper buildings that she can see from the roof and the George Washington Bridge. She imagines that she can fly and she can make life better for her family. That's interesting, right? Lying on the roof and dreaming of something. When you look at the stars, do you dream of things? I know I do. I'm not going to read the part for teachers right now. I'm going to come back to it. This page is growing up, okay? Looking back at the 1930s, people didn't ask little girls what they want to be when they grew up. It was a kind of assumed that you were going to be a wife and mommy, you know? Now, my mother wanted us to be somebody out there in the world. So what we knew and what we were trained to think about was we were going to college. That was definite. But it wasn't said what we were going to be. My family had no idea I would be an artist. I had a professor at the City College of New York where I graduated with a degree in art who never once told me that he didn't like my drawings. At the end of the semester, we had a series of 4 drawings to do as a test. One of them had to do with mountains. Now, I was born and raised in New York City, and in the summers, we went to the seashore, so the mountains, I don't know about, okay? So I did these mountains, and I gave them to him, and he said, "What are these?" And I said, "Those are mountains." So he said, "Write it on here." I said, "Does this mean you don't think I can draw? I plan to be an artist." He said, "Well, I don't see any indications that you can." So when he said, "You can't be an artist, you can't draw," I said, "Oh, yes, I can. Definitely can. I mean, I wasn't sure whether I could, but for now, just because you say I can't." I want to tell you that's exactly my story. I was told I could not draw. And my art teachers did not like my drawings in high school. I could not draw faces and feet and hands, but I could draw lots of other things. So I was told I could not draw. And I was told I could not be an artist, and guess what? I did not listen. So if anybody says to you, you cannot be something, and you really, really, really want to be it, go with your heart. Your heart will tell you what you came to the earth to do, right? I listened to my heart more than I listened to my teachers about being an artist. At college, I was taught to copy Greek busts And I was taught to copy Cezanne and Rembrandt and so on because that was the way they did it then. Later, I had to unlearn that. Not unlearn it because I still know it, but I had to find out what my art was going to look like. That happened to me too. In trying to develop my own art, I would mix my European training with my knowledge of classical African art, and that would be my African American art. And that is me, because I'm a composite of my African roots and my American European culture. So I went to museums, I bought books on African art, and I copied again. I copied. In this copying, I deliberately made the heads of people more prominent. In African art, the head is considered the seat of wisdom and used bold, flat shapes. I learned a lot about African design, symmetry, repetition, pattern, texture, and so on. And then I incorporated these elements in my art, which became not African art, but African American art. And I used it to express not the African experience, which I didn't have, but the African American experience. And that's what my art really is. It's an expression of the African American female experience. So she learned from copying, and you could do that too. You could look on the internet or on your phone for something from your culture. If your ancestors came from Africa, you could look at African art. My ancestors came from Greece, and I look at Greek art. I am a Greek American female artist. Each of us has a culture. Our ancestors came from someplace, right? You might want to look up, what does the art look like in the country that my ancestors came from? And how is that art important to me now, here in America? That's very interesting. Okay, now she's going to talk about quilt making. This here is Susie Shannon, about 1990. Wow. No, 1900. I'm sorry. I'm not wearing my glasses. We already talked about that, right? And this quilt was made in the 1880s by an African-American woman named Harriet Powers, who was born into slavery in 1837. So despite being a slave, she made this beautiful quilt. That's what Faith Ringgold meant by adversity, right? Harriet Powers did not grow up free. That's a very difficult situation, but she made a gorgeous quilt. The African American woman is credited with the beginning of quilt making in America. She did it as part of her duties as a slave girl, making covers for the family. Quilts are part of my own family tradition. My mother remembered watching her grandmother, Betsy Bingham, boil and bleach flour sacks until they were white as snow, to line the quilts she made. My great-great-grandmother, Susie Shannon, Betsy's mother, had taught her to sew quilts. She was a slave and made quilts for the plantation owners as part of her duties as a house girl. In African art, utilitarian objects were made beautiful. So the slave women incorporated traditional African designs on these coverlets and created in America what today we call the quilt. This would mean that quilt making is like jazz. Both were begun by African Americans. In the case of jazz, by African American men, and in the case of quilts by African American women, they constitute two original contributions made by Americans to the whole world. So if you are African American, this is a sense of great pride for you. People from your culture invented two amazing art forms. Utilitarian, what does that mean? Those are everyday objects which have a use, like a fork or a coffee cup. Okay, let's do one more page. Is it art? I'll show you the picture first. Is it art? I have a feeling Faith Ringgold is going to talk about utilitarian art, like quilts, which are art, but they could also be used as a blanket. And maybe she's going to ask the question, is it art? Let's see. Is it art? My soft sculptures began as dolls, and then masks, then hanging figures, and then freestanding sculptures. Mrs. Jones and family from the Family of Woman mask series is a portrait of my family. I did it in 1973. My mother made the clothes. In the late 1960s, when I began thinking about incorporating various forms of African art into my own, like fabric and beading, people wanted to know, what is this? Is this real art? Or is this some sort of folk tradition that you're using here? I think art is serious if it is based on something you know about and have experienced, if there are important ideas involved, as opposed to just imitating the art of others for the lack of idea of your own, like wearing a basket from a kit. No, like weaving a basket from a kit. Whether it is traditional or modern or cutting edge or whatever isn't important. Does it communicate to people? That's what's important in art. Do these dolls communicate to you? Faith Ringgold is saying that's what's important in art, and also that it is your own and comes from your own experience. I like her ideas on art making very much. I'm going to stop there, but I want you to think about some of these things. I will continue tomorrow, but look around your house. Do you have any quilts? Do you have any pottery that is art, but you can also use it? I'm looking around my room now. Oh, I see something that's utilitarian, but also artistic. Hold on one second. I didn't think to bring this pillow and get it ready, but I love the pattern on this pillow. It reminds me of Round Trip, right? It's black and white. It's patterned like another book we read. Which book was that which had a pattern in the beginning? Do you remember? Anansi and the Spider had that. So look, I could put the pillow with a vertical pattern, or I could put the pillow with a horizontal pattern, or I could put the pillow this way. But the main thing is, it's an object I can lean on, just like this one. Whoops. But it's also beautiful. And you might have something in your house like that. If you do, I would love you to take a cell phone photo and show it to me. Send it to my email address that's on the blog, steamempowerment@gmail.com, and I will put it on the blog for you. Okay, have a great Thursday. Goodbye.